Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Is AEW an unsafe working environment? Or words to that effect. I am Luke Owen, DAD. I'm joined by Chopper Pete Quinnell. We are 2/3 of the Blackpool Content Club here on the WrestleTalk Podcast channel. Please do give us a thumbs up. Press that subscribe button if you're new here. We're on our way to 70k, where we're going to do that 10-hour Royal Rumble randomizer live stream.
Bit of fun, that.
It will be a bit of fun.
Yeah.
If our 50k Let's Watch all of the Attitude Era WrestleManias then to go by, it'll be poorly timed out,
Yes.
too long,
Yes.
and tiring,
Yes.
but also good see.
And also, you get to watch us eat pizza.
And have coffees.
and have coffees. I wasn't even drinking coffee at the time. That's how long ago that was.
That's right, you weren't, were you?
No, I was a little baby.
Yeah.
I couldn't have it.
So did
I had two sugars in my tea and everything.
you have a little hot chocolate instead?
It wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
With a couple of little marshmallows in there.
Yeah. We should also probably clarify, Tempest isn't here. He's not feeling well.
He's not, no. We've had quite a week for it.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's not been great the last few weeks / even like a month at this point. A lot of people being ill.
Yeah, there was a comment left on I think it was on the AEW review you did, because Ollie wasn't well, so he wasn't in. My wife wasn't well, so I had to be home to watch the kid. And there was just a comment that was left. It was like, as the English just prone to being ill? Just feel like you guys are ill a lot.
Yes. Yes, we are.
It's cold here, and we're not allowed to have the heating on anymore.
We don't get any vitamin D because there's never any sun.
No, even our summer was a bit cack this year. So anyway, Tempo is not here because he is a bit under the weather. So it's 2/3 of the Blackpool Content Club for you this week, as we talk about a topic that I think we can answer in a couple of words. But
I'll do you one better. I can answer it in one.
Okay. All right. Do you want to ask the question then?
Please.
Is AEW an unsafe working environment?
No.
Press the subscribe button. Watch another video that we link to in the video description down below, the podcast description. But no, this is the Content Club. So we're going to dive into a couple of different areas here.
Yes.
And the reason why this has come up is because AEW have had not a great latter half of 2022, I would say. I think since Double or Nothing, it has been bad times and then furthermore bad times.
Yes.
To the point where I think people are now just a little bit sick of, like, when Brawl Out happened, it was like the biggest news, and it was like any video you did about that was getting like killer numbers, and everyone just had like mad conversations to be had about it and mad discussion to be had about it. I guess because it's Punk and it's the Bucks and Omega and this and the other. But then like Sammy and Andrade got into an altercation, and I was like, don't care. Honestly, couldn't care less.
Yeah. It does drain you at a certain point to hear the same thing but with different people a lot.
It does. And actually, there was the Conan thing that he did on his Keeping It 100 emoji podcast, where he was talking about how Eddie Kingston and Santana nearly got into a physical altercation as well.
Yeah.
And that, like, any other year would have been like headline news. But with the 8 months that AEW has had, it's just buried amongst a bunch of other backstage or on-screen nonsense.
Yeah. It's they've not had a good back half of the year. It's not been great. Like, the wrestling has been good. But the backstage politics and just the vibe surrounding AEW has been off. It didn't pass the vibe check.
No, it is failing vibe checks at the moment.
It is,
yeah. I mean, and really, they don't actually have a really big check to do on that, but they are just got a really bad set of D20 rolls. And have yet to, like, not even with their buffs, have sort of like passed across this.
Yeah, I know. And, in years gone by, they had like a +10, +12 modifier to that.
Exactly.
And now it's gone way down.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird.
But even with that +12,
Yeah.
like, actually maybe, I suppose the buff's probably gone down by that point. The modifier's probably way lower now. It's probably maybe like a +4, which is actually making the checks harder to do.
Exactly, yeah. And maybe even the DC's increased at the same time. So, it's so difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've had a difficult time. And this week, I didn't get to do the review of Dynamite this week, which I was gusted about because I loved this week's episode of Dynamite.
Really good episode.
Oh, it's an awesome episode of Dynamite.
Yeah.
It was the other comment I did spot where someone said, Compete and Tempest do it all the time. They're always positive. And it wasn't being sarcastic. It was it was against me and Ollie for, quote, always hating AEW.
Yeah, Luke, famous hater of AEW.
Yeah. And, anyway, so I really wanted to review it because I was loving it. My first note I took of the evening, aside from, oh my God, they've just showed Punk in Ring of Honor. I think it was like the first time outside of the video game thing they've showed Punk, was it was during the opening match of the trios, Best Friends and Death Triangle. And I've just wrote down, it's always a good reminder to me why I prefer the in-ring style of AEW than I do over WWE. That's not to say that WWE's in-ring style is bad, because I think they always put on banging matches and great stuff. But there is something about the AEW style I much prefer. And it's during those real dark periods of WWE when creative was bad, and even then the matches were bad, and booking was bad, and stories were bad, and champs were bad, and this and the other. It felt like no one was being utilized, or like bad main roster call-ups and all this sort of jazz, right? You went to Ring of Honor, you went to Impact, you went to New Japan, you'd be like, oh yeah, like this is the style of wrestling I like. Like me and Ollie would go to Rev Pro shows and be like, yes, this is the style of wrestling I really enjoy watching. So I'm there just having an absolute ball watching this episode of Dynamite. I was like, trios match, awesome. Storm Sheeta, awesome. Jericho, Dalton Castle, so much fun. An ironically sports entertainment match.
Oh my God. Jake Hager. Favorite spot of the match.
I love this hat.
He likes his hat.
He loves that hat, and none of the boys could take that hat away from him.
And it's so good because he looks so dumb in the hat. It makes it so much better.
When Jake Hager first did that, I love this hat. And he did it off microphone. I said to Ollie in the AEW Dynamite review, I was like, it's the best thing he's done in AEW. And he's been there for 3 years.
Yeah.
Just saying, I like this hat.
Yeah.
It's the best thing he's done.
It was beautiful.
It's his little bit of the bubbly.
Yeah, exactly. It's great.
And then I was watching this main event of Hangman and Moxley, and god dang, it was great. It was so great. Love Moxley. I love Hangman. I was like, Moxley winning, it's a foregone conclusion for me, but I don't mind too much. Then there was like the bit of a dun intrigue because they showed up to the rafters and MJF was no longer there, hugging onto his chip. I'm like,
what's he doing?
I'd done a bit of fantasy booking that maybe he'd cash in, and they would do the title switch of MJF winning the belt in Cincinnati. They zigged when I thought they were going to zag and did a better storyline than I possibly could. So major kudos to them there. But then Hangman got hurt.
Yes.
Off what was a pretty standard spot. And
You see it all the time.
You see it all the time. It was just an awkward landing, an awkward bump, and they called the match off, and that was it. Dunzo. They just announced that Moxley retains. And then we got some awkwardness of the commentary trying to cover up for things, and sort of Moxley just sort of walking around the ring and then cutting his promo, and then MJF coming down. Like I thought the MJF stuff was likely planned in the episode because it followed on from the William Regal thing, right?
Yeah.
Which I thought was an awesome story. So great.
It's one of the best things I've seen in wrestling.
And that's the thing you want to be talking about, right? But unfortunately,
really
we've got to be talking about this.
When Luke said to me today in the office, he was like, so we're going to do like, is AEW an unsafe work environment? I was like, but can't we just talk about MJF? Because I just want to talk about it more because he's great.
And he is great. And I was like, yeah, but we did that 2 weeks ago. So like 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. So we've got to do this instead because this is the hot button topic that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's a real bummer. And it really was like the thing that everyone wanted to talk about. And I really like it. It's a really sad thing, but it increased this idea that AEW was an unsafe place to work.
Yeah. That
all of these backseat quarterback analysts being like, like the most common thing I saw on the old Twitter sphere was like, if AEW had a performance center, this never would have happened. Which is kind of a nonsense phrase.
Yes.
Because accidents happen in WWE all the time.
They sure do.
Like Becky Lynch is currently on the injured shelf because she got injured during a match.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Boogs at WrestleMania this year got injured during the match and they had to change things on the fly.
If only he'd gone through the performance center.
Just there are ways to avoid these things. And even when Chris Nowinski put out a tweet about this, Chris Nowinski, for those who might not remember, he was a WWE guy way back in the day, sort of that mid-2000s period of time when no one really liked a lot of wrestling, and he got concussions, and he's now been the figurehead guy for talking about concussions in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of posting about it. He's done a lot of research. He is a credible guy in this field. He is an expert in this field, does a lot of work with NFL and is very vocal about concussions in wrestling and the dangers of it. He was the guy that was like, when the Benoit tragedy happened, he was like the guy at the front of the queue to be like, I want the brain so we can analyze it and as part of our studies and stuff. Here's what he had to say. Sending positive thoughts to Hangman. This was not a high-risk move. Something went wrong. Referee Paul Turner is trained to recognize a concussion or a possible neck injury and stop the match. Doc Sampson was ringside and there in seconds, gives us the best chance for a good outcome. Paul Turner was not scared to potentially end a main event match, calling in the doctor. Let him know how much you appreciate him keeping the talent safe. So you'd think that's a pretty cut and dry thing. As an expert in the field saying they did everything possibly right here.
Yeah.
And yet, if you go through the replies to that, it's like, but what about this? Well, this wouldn't have happened in WWE. Mox is a garbage wrestler, and it's any other. And so I guess I've talked for a lot here. I appreciate it. So I wanted to throw across to you, like, why do you think this is the response this spot got?
I think it's a combination of things. It's people just holding ill will against AEW. There's a large section of these people, I'm pretty sure, that just don't like AEW, and if they do something wrong, they will come out and be like, lol, AEW sucks. Regardless of if it's AEW's fault or not. And in some cases of stuff that's happened this year, it has been AEW's fault.
Massively so.
And, fair enough, you can critique the things that AEW do wrong, because they do stuff wrong sometimes. But for stuff like this, that is a freak accident. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a phrase. When you put the cart before the horse. I
wondered if that's where you were going, but I didn't want to jump in.
Yeah, cart before the horse situation, in that you've come up with the conclusion that AEW sucks before knowing what the thing is. You just hear, someone's got injured on AEW, means, that means AEW's unsafe. That means AEW sucks. And that's bad. But also, this has come at the apex of AEW having a very bad string of luck in terms of injuries. So when you constantly hear, if you're not too familiar with AEW's programming, and you just hear, Adam Cole's been injured, Ruby Soho's been injured, CM Punk has been injured, Kenny Omega's been injured, and now Hangman Adam Page has been injured, you go, man, something must be happening in AEW where they must be unsafe. That otherwise, why would these injuries be happening if it's not an unsafe place? It's a conclusion you can draw. If you don't watch the program thoroughly, that is a conclusion you could draw. It would be the incorrect conclusion, but I think, from that person's perspective, that is a logical conclusion you can draw. This place has a lot of injuries, therefore must be unsafe.
Yeah, we saw it during AEW's had a bad track record of women's division. I think that is an undeniable point. I think at this point, I'm sure some people can argue against the AEW have had a bad women's division or a bad run with their women's division since their inception. But for me personally, I think it has been an afterthought at best.
Big time.
And at times sort of semi-pushed. But when, and one of the detractors that people used to say about the women's division in AEW being like, well, they can't push the AEW. There's too many botches. They do too many botches in their matches. So Tony knows he can't put on more than one match, a show. And I kind of sat back a little bit and I was kind of analyzing, because I saw it on a couple of videos and a couple of comments coming up being like, so it was this sort of new run idea of why AEW doesn't have a decent women's division, right? And I was like, why is that? And I was like, well, I guess in the last match that was on TV, maybe there was one or two blown spots in there. But then the 5 matches prior to that, there weren't. And maybe the 10 matches prior to that, there weren't. And so you're like, so why is it just because it's happened recently? So it's like aha. It's like what you were saying there. You're looking for a reason. Like, well, why does it suck? Aha. Well, that's it. I found it. It's because they botch everything that they do. They botch every move that they do, so to speak. And that's sort of exacerbated then when it's the only match on the entire show. That almost highlights it further. If you only have one women's match on a card and then there is a botch within that match, it's like, well, all the women's matches are then just nothing but botch fest, right? And I guess because this was the main event, and it happened, and like you said, it's got to come back of Adam Cole is currently out with a concussion-related injury, and then he came back at Forbidden Door, and that match fell apart because of another concussion-related injury. And Meltzer has been on Wrestling Observer Radio being like no one's talking about it, no one's really heard anything. I don't think that's a good sign. That's a real worry. That's a compounding thing, and then you combine that with all the Brawl Out stuff, the Sammy and Andrade stuff, Eddie Kingston stuff, and then I think Moxley is another guy that is a target of garbage wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he has done deathmatch stuff and, made a name for himself in deathmatch wrestling, and it's a style that he really enjoys. People make fun of him because he bleeds in every one of his title matches, or if he doesn't, it's like, oh, Moxley didn't bleed in a title match. Like, this is the only way you can get over is to bleed in a title match. So I think like it all just sort of came to a head in that one thing.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, like, there's this call for AEW being this unsafe working environment when unfortunately it's a business and a sport where accidents do happen.
Another interesting point, I think, as well, is that for AEW, they have a lot of hours of programming per week, if you include Dark and Dark Elevation as well. It's a lot of wrestling that happens. And on those shows, there is more wrestling than there is on other big products like WWE, for example. On a regular Raw or SmackDown, there'd be 3, 4, 5 matches, at most 5 matches, I'd say. On AEW, you get 4 matches in an hour of Rampage. There's more wrestling happening and more minutes of wrestling, which also then compounds the amount of time that accidents can occur in. Mm-hmm. You see there are more accidents happening because there is more wrestling. That is an inherent part of wrestling. Accidents happen. It's a high-risk thing. That's just part and parcel of wrestling.
It ain't ballet, folks.
It ain't ballet, folks, even though ballet is also very physically intensive, and you can get injured in ballet as well. That's not the point.
No, Pete, I don't think any ballet actor no ballet dancer has ever hurt themselves doing ballet. I've seen Black Swan. It's nothing but petticoats and rainbows.
That's perfectly it, yeah. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. There's more wrestling happening, so more opportunities for stuff to go wrong. There is like a more athletic style in AEW, in that people do more crazy spots a lot. And I will say a lot of times they'll do spots like, I don't agree with doing that spot. Darby Allin doing crazy stuff, Jeff Hardy diving off huge ladders, and tons of crazy stuff. What was the one where the guy landed on his back on the chairs? Whatever it was, probably Adam Cole.
It sounds like the sort of thing he
sounds like an Adam Cole thing.
If it ain't him, it's Owens.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's stuff where it's like, I don't agree with them doing those spots. To me, that is reckless and unsafe, some of these spots. But it's never those spots that actually get people injured, because they actually plan them and like maybe even practice them beforehand. It's the stuff that's inane, that's the normal wrestling spots where people get hurt when accidents happen. And that's the stuff that people always jump on to go, well, that's such a basic thing and they got injured off that. And then it becomes like this whole thing of being like, well, they must be an unsafe wrestler. Why don't they know the basics? Blah, 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 blah. When sometimes just accidents happen. People can get tired in a match. Like it's just a thing that happens.
Yeah, I can't imagine looking at Moxley this year and being like, oh man, he's always injuring people. I'm like, well, point me to all of these other times that it has happened. Like, this is a one freak occurrence thing that's happened. And it really was just like an out of nowhere situation. And you're right, like an interesting thing, I think, but you and I are different ages. I'd argue in some cases different generations in terms of like the wrestling that we grew up with, or the wrestling that we sort of gravitated towards. And I think actually that kind of goes across generations and things like that. But case in point, Ollie and I next week for Patreon, we're doing Bound for Glory 2005. And TNA in that period of time did a lot of like high risk moves because it was a way to sort of like grab attention and stuff. But also it was the style at the time. And there's this tag match on Bound for Glory between America's Most Wanted and the Naturals, where the Naturals, like in the sort of opening moments, like one of them takes James Storm to the outside and power bombs him into the guardrail. And it is like a horrifically like, oh my God, like it is gross. And I was reading Brian Alvarez's review of it at the time, and he was like, why on earth would you do that bump? Like, that is a stupid bump to take. And he said, and I believe this is a direct quote, Storm sold it like he broke his back. For all I know, he did.
Yeah.
Because it's a dumb bump to take.
Yeah.
However, transport me back to 2005, and I'm like, that's a cool-ass bump. That's wicked. Like, I remember them doing power bombs onto the apron and stuff, being like, that's awesome. Look how cool that is. Watching Abyss and Sabu having their barbed wire massacre match where the ropes are replaced with barbed wire. And like, I only thought of that when I was watching Bound for Glory, because Abyss's tattoo on his arm is fine. But like now it's all like cut to shreds and stuff because it got all cut up in that barbed wire match. But there were people at the time being like, why are you doing this? Like, what a stupid thing to do. Yeah, and I was like, that's rad. That's awesome. That's so cool. But you did the ECW One Night Stand, the second one.
2006.
2006. And it's a brilliant episode to listen to because it's Ollie being like, how cool is this, Pete? And you'll be like, it's a bit much.
Like, I enjoyed it. And then it gets to a point where we're like, you lost me. I was having fun, and now I'm not having fun anymore. Especially when they do the unprotected chair shots to the head. That's just a line I'm just like, no, I can't enjoy that anymore.
Yeah, that is the one thing I now look back on and be like, man, I can't believe there's a period of time. Like, if someone put their hands up, I'd be like, no, not a wrestler, are you? Not a real wrestler putting your hand up.
Why don't you take that on your head? The thing that contains your brain, you idiot.
Oh, God, you're wuss.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a man.
Ugh.
But it's, there are, I think there are people now that just really dislike the deathmatch style and just sort of then think, if that's the style that you do, I'm not going to bring up Cornette here, but I think that is what a lot of people are going to be thinking when you talk about this thing. So I think I don't want to focus on it, but I think he is a name that you do need to bring up in this.
Sure.
It's not his favorite thing either. Is that if you do the deathmatch style, you do not know how to wrestle. If you wrestle on places like AEW, you do not know how to wrestle because you are from the Trampoline Federation or whatever it is, the Outlaw Mud Shows or whatever it is. And I think it's just this idea that if you say that enough, people just believe that that's the case.
100%.
And so then you don't look at this from a viewpoint of like, accidents can happen in wrestling. Accidents happen in NWA, in classic wrestling. It happens in WWE.
Yeah.
But you're like, nope. That is not an isolated incident. That is an epidemic problem, I think, though. Like, that is I don't know.
Endemic.
Endemic? Is that the word I'm after?
I don't know.
It happens all the time. Because they don't know how to work. Joey Janela used to get this, and still does get this all the time.
Yeah. That's the thing, is it's different styles of wrestling. It's not that you don't know how to wrestle. It's just a different style of wrestling. I don't agree with any of that. But I can understand why there is also an element of, to play devil's advocate on that argument, there has been instances of people who cannot wrestle using that as a cover to do stuff. There's big, celebrity matches, or there'll be like a Vince McMahon match or whatever, where he can't really wrestle, so they just do a bunch of weapon spots to cover for the lack of wrestling.
Every Vince McMahon match is a no-holds-barred match.
Absolutely, yeah, because it has to be, because he can't wrestle.
It's only smoke and mirrors.
Exactly.
As a way to hide the fact that we're not Frank Gotch out here.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean that someone can't wrestle. They may just like the deathmatch style of wrestling.
Yeah.
Those are two completely different things.
Yeah, I think it is two different, but it's people looking at one of them and being like, 1 + 1 = 2, and that is why Hangman got hurt. It's because I was going to say
love
3.
that you struggled.
Well, I was going to say
1
3.
+ 1 = 2.
It's because instantly I was going to go because 1 and 1 makes 3. It's the line from Cult of Personality. Because it's a way to be like, I'm telling you something that is wrong, but you think it is right.
Yes.
Or I'm telling you that it's right. But I was like, no, I actually want to get this right.
Which is, what's the correct
answer? So I had to pause and be like,
2.
1 + 1 is, I can't say 3 because that's wrong. It's not 4. It's probably 2 then.
2. Probably.
So you put 1 and 1 together and you get 5. And you decide then that Moxley always hurts people and he always injures people. The other thing I think from AEW is that you kind of look back to a couple of years ago during the pandemic era of AEW, you had that moment with the multi-man tag match where someone got that concussion. I was trying to think who it was. Was it Reynolds of the Dark Order? I should have looked this up beforehand. I did some other research on the Athena Jody Threat match we'll get into in just a second. I'll look into that in just a moment to clarify it. But they had that, and he had that concussion. He was just laid in the ring for a long time because no one really picked up on what was going on, and the doctors were not quick enough to react.
Yeah.
And the absolute worst example of this, although that was a horrendous, awful example, is Matt Hardy at All Out.
Yeah, 100%.
He should not have been allowed to continue that.
No, absolutely not.
I think it is one of the worst things that has happened on a major wrestling show. I can't even think what is worse than that in terms of something that should never have taken place and you carried on or allowed the wrestler to to dictate what goes on here. Yeah. It is actually, like, it's unforgivable that happened. But then you compare what happened there, you compare what happened in the tag match, and you compare what happened on Dynamite. Instantly, Paul Turner was like, "That's not right."
Yep, calling off the match. That's them.
Yeah, and he goes in, he quickly chats to Hangman, then goes across to Moxley, goes on and be like, "Doctor, get in here." And it's incredible how quickly they reacted to this situation and dealt with this situation so as to keep the show going, keep the show flowing, but not, like, put some focus on it. A really good job not put the camera on him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, camera cuts away from things. Do you remember, like, in the World Cup, there was that lad that got, like, heavily injured?
Yeah.
And there were people who were mad that they weren't filming it, and they were just showing the crowd and stuff. And I was like, no, because, like, that's not the thing to be filming right now. The thing to be filming is other things.
Yeah.
So I think the AEW has done a lot of bad this year, but this is one of those moments where I'm like, I don't think you can criticize the company in any way over what happened here or any of the guys involved. I think they handled it brilliantly. And I think there was nothing untoward here. Mm-hmm. And really, the people who are the most vocal against this are the bad faith takes of an AEW botches Twitter account or whatever it is that just watches Dynamite and actually, like, hate watches a show.
It's a hate watch, yeah.
To find something that goes wrong, so they can post up onto their 215 followers and be like, look at them, they can't do anything right in this company. Because that's what gives them thrills in their life, I guess. But those people's voices tend to be amplified, and all of a sudden there becomes this big conversation about, like, what's an unsafe work environment?
Yeah, and it's not, like we said, it comes from those bad faith takes originally, and like I said, the voice just gets amplified, and the more that people say it, regardless of who's saying it and how credible a person is, it's kind of just like, this is probably a larger conversation to do with social media as a whole, but it does feel like everyone's voice holds the same weight on social media. It doesn't matter if you're an expert in the field. It doesn't matter if you have a track record with this sort of stuff or whatever. If you say that AEW is an unsafe work environment and someone sees that, that holds the same weight as one other person saying, no, it's not. And that's not the case. Yeah. It's just not true. But
I cannot find this tag match, you know.
Which one? The
Dark
Order one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the Dark Order. I've literally Googled AEW tag match concussion and I'm not finding it.
Was it
injury 2020? Let's try this. No, this
is good.
Audio
content.
Do you know what's funny though? And not funny because it's awful. But if you just search for, like, AEW tag injury 2020, it's just like injured stars written off the show. Ray Phoenix breaks arm. Christian Cage injury led to quick match against Jungle Boy. Yep. Backstage news regarding Matt Jackson injury.
Yep.
Kenny Omega injury updates. Thunder Rosa pulled from All Out with injury. And it's just like, and I guess maybe that is also why a lot of people are like, because if there's been some injuries that have happened like elsewhere and stuff, it's just like, oh man, well, it must be a style thing that is, as opposed to a run of bad luck.
Yeah, I genuinely think it is a run of bad luck. And we've seen this run of bad luck happen in places like WWE in the past. There was one WrestleMania that I remember, which one was it? It might have been WrestleMania 31, somewhere around that time. In the lead up to Mania, not 31, it was one where, it must have been 32, was when everybody and their grandma got injured ahead of that Mania. And they had nobody for that show. Like, that was when Seth did his ACL in on the house show. They had a bunch of people off that show. And it led to not great WrestleMania, that one. But that sort of run of bad luck wasn't because people were being unsafe or WWE was bad or whatever. It was just a run of bad luck, and that's what they're on right now. Maybe there's a conversation to be had about people not doing crazy high-risk stuff, but I don't think anyone really does that too often. You know, when's the last time you saw a stupid Darby Allin spot?
I mean, yeah, like that. The one I can think of is the Hardy thing, is the Jeff Hardy match. But I think it was like Hardy was doing a lot of the mad stuff in there.
100%, and that was a few months ago. You know? It's not every week that you see something dumb, and people have physically impressive offense for sure. You know, you see the luchadors and the high flyers of AEW do some crazy flips and all that, but it's very rare that you see stuff like that go wrong. You know, that there was like a couple of unfortunate spots with like the Luchasaurus chokeslam and Ray Phoenix and him doing the arm snap that it didn't end up being broken somehow because he's made of rubber. And like, that's an unfortunate spot, and maybe there could have been more precautions to do that a bit more safely, but those are minor things. At the end of the day, that is an accident. It's not like they were just being reckless about it. That was just an accident. And that's the case, I think, for the vast majority of the injuries that has happened on AEW, it's just a run of bad luck.
Can confirm it was Alex Reynolds.
Yeah. Nice.
There you go. Found it.
Well done.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sure there will still be comments that were left in there telling us where it is, but I did find it. So thank you. Apologies for that.
Yeah.
Because I got to the other reason why I think this has become a hot button topic is because not only did you have this episode of Dynamite, the day before that you had... Was it Dark or Dark? It was on Dark,
it was Dark,
wasn't it? Yeah. Which had actually been taped the week previous while they were in Canada. It was a match between Athena and local talent Jody Threat, though she's not really local talent. She's actually she's been in the ring for a long, long period of time.
Indeed.
And people started to go after Athena because she was being roughhousing. And I think people who were not aware of Jody Threat assumed that she was a local indie worker that was fresh on the scene, and this was Athena taking advantage of a rookie in inverted air quotes. And actually, so you sort of fell into the two camps of the argument, which is just that this was unprofessional and she manhandled a rookie, or she was unprofessional in that situation. And other people being like, have you ever seen Joshi wrestling? It is it's stiff strikes and stuff and things like that. And some people really like that style, the New Japan style. My friend, I remember watching with him Ishii and Shibata, and he cannot watch it. He just recoils at it, because in his argument, and I don't disagree with this either, is I don't want to see people actually just kick the crap out of each other. I don't want to watch people hit each other for real. Yeah, because if I wanted that, I can watch UFC, and I don't like UFC. Yeah, and I think Raven used to make this argument as well. It's just anyone can throw a real punch. Yeah, the skill of being a wrestler is being able to throw a worked punch and not hurt someone. Yeah. So this became such a hot topic on Twitter that Sean Ross Sapp looked into it. And it turns out there was clearly something that did upset some people there. Because this is what he wrote. The match between Athena and local standout Jody Threat got a lot of attention for reasons that weren't evident at the start of the match. Threat got a great ovation, and Athena ended up working heel opposite Threat, but ended up getting too aggressive in the ring for AEW management. There was a spot where Jody Threat slipped on what her comeback was supposed to be. We're told that Jody Threat was a little lost and asked Athena what was next in the match to get back on track, and the match devolved into more physicality. Several were quick to note that while they're confident Jody Threat has no problem handling that physicality, it shouldn't have happened anyway, and the communication should have been clearer. Those close to Athena indicated that each women were approached by management after the match to make sure everything was okay. One source familiar with the situation believed that should have been an opportunity to lead by example as opposed to letting it devolve. Those close to Athena believed that it was the way the match was going to go because of her having to switch to the heel role due to Jody's babyface reaction. We didn't hear of any confrontation or anything of the sort between the two women after the match. It was reiterated to us that not everything that is being micro-analyzed on social media was a result of this situation. We're also told that Jody Threat has often complained about how the match went. Hasn't spoke on the match or situation and indicated everything out of the normal publicly. All we've heard from her side of things is she's not big on the attention that emanates from situations such as these. Generally, to keep her head down and avoid political aspects of wrestling. Oh, isn't that an example to lead by?
That's nice. Yeah, that's good. And here we are talking about it.
Go us!
Yeah. So this situation is interesting because that's been a very common thing in wrestling of the past. In people taking receipts in the ring, and if you work stiff against me, I'll work stiff against you back, and then I'll hit you 4 realsies and JBL and all that stuff. And you could make an argument that that's what's happening here. If there was something that angered Athena and she just took out her frustration on Jody Threat, sure, that's probably not a good thing, but it was still safe. She didn't injure her. They were just stiff strikes, and stiff striking is a form of wrestling, and Jody Threat does stiff striking. That's just... And with Athena working heel against Jody Threat, you can do the more stiff strikes. It's the stuff that looks more vicious when you're a heel. There's nothing to this, gang. There's nothing to this.
I was just on Twitter the other night, and ad break during the middle of a show, right? So my wife goes out to make a drink. So I'm I'll just let up on myself on Twitter. And it was a trending... I saw Athena was a trending topic, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? And all I could see was people just talking about the discourse as opposed to what had actually happened. And this might be the most talked about dark match in the history of AEW Dark.
Yeah.
And the Elite have been on Dark.
Yeah.
Like, they've had a match on there. Very fun match as well, by the way. I think it was against the Dark Order. I can't remember who it was against now, but I remember them being very fun. And I was just like kind of taken aback a little bit by this. And it was only when Sean's report came out that I was like, oh man, even management spoke to it. But I wonder if that's also them just trying to quell anything that might come out, because they're probably walking on eggshells right now, because nothing that this company do is going right. And you know, the Moxley situation, when he was working with them without a contract, the plan reportedly was they were going to announce that he'd re-signed his deal at the Cincinnati show, because you're in front of your hometown, you get that big hometown pop. But because there'd been so much negative press about AEW following Brawl out and then following Sammy and Andrade, they brought the announcement forward and just announced it on social media. And that's also what caught GCW unaware as well, because they had their Mox Engage match that they were advertising.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this AEW management's approaching both these people to ask, like, what happened here was just a case of, look, the last thing that we need is more people having a pop at us for putting out something like this.
100%. And the thing is, that's just a good thing to do, regardless. Like, if you see something that looks a little bit off in the ring, whether it is someone working too stiff or someone isn't quite up to scratch for that day or something looks off, whatever, just go up and ask if they're okay. Because that's what it was. It was them going up and be like, everything okay?
Here?
Is everything all right?
Yeah.
And then that was it, you know? It wasn't them reprimanding them and being like, oh, you know, you can't do that, blah, 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 blah. It was
There
just
was
like,
no confrontation.
No confrontation, everything was okay. It was just like, they were just checking in and be like, everything all right? Good. Okay, cool. That's it.
Yeah.
That's everything that happened. That's it. That's the whole story, gang.
And it's kind of amazing. Like, you know, Meltzer. Sean Rossap mentions there sort of the micro-analyzing of this on Twitter has actually made it a story.
Yeah, 100%.
And I would wager that a lot of these people who are having a whinge and a moan about this, or having a pop at Athena about this, for working stiff or what have you, probably haven't seen the match, but have just been told that it was bad. In the same way that, like, I don't think many people have seen the Acolytes beating the absolute piss out of Public Enemy when they came in to WWF, because the idea was they're like, oh, you're the guys that are meant to be extreme, well, we're just going to kick the crap out of you and see what happens. Public Enemy then went backstage and were like, this guy's beat the piss out of us, it's supposed to be a work. And then the Acolytes were like, well, they don't know how to work, and they got canned. And they did the exact same thing with the Dudley Boys, but the Dudley Boys didn't complain. And then that was like, okay, they're all right, they can hang out here then. Perry Saturn's moppy gimmick comes off the back of him beating up a local talent and getting frustrated with the local talent in the ring and beating the absolute tar out of him. And moppy was a punishment for doing that. If you watch like those examples, the Perry Saturn one's harder to find because I think it was like Velocity or something.
Yeah.
Like, and while everything is on the network, Velocity has not made it yet. This is not that match.
No.
But yet the way that social media blew up this match, it made it feel like it was going to be this like real beatdown of a veteran beating down and you know, I'm using Big Bucky O'Hare is here, but you know, when I watched the match, I'm like, there's just some stiff strikes here. It's like, I mean, they're laying this in, but also it's like it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. I don't see why this would be an issue. If you've seen stiff strike in wrestling before, it's that.
Like when no one said it about like Danielson and Suzuki, and like, or you know, like the Danielson Kingston match. Remember that thumbnail that we used for the Danielson Kingston match?
Yeah.
Where like Kingston's chest is like literally like pressed in. Or the Walter Sheamus stuff. Like, weren't we all like giving Sheamus and Walter like a standing ovation for
match
being
of the year?
Like match of the year for beating the tar out of each other at Clash of the Castle.
Yeah.
Yet these two do it here on Dark, and it's like taking advantage, working stiff.
I think the difference in this one is it feels like, in people's perception of it, it feels like Athena just did it, and it wasn't necessarily planned. But people don't know that it wasn't planned. People are assuming that it wasn't planned because there was a mess up right before it. There was a botch before it, and then Athena started getting aggressive.
Yeah.
And you could link those things together, but this might have been the plan of the match anyway. Like they said, they turned Athena heel for the match because she had to work against the local hometown hero. So this could have always been the plan for her to do stiff striking against Jody Threat. Like, that seems like a totally feasible thing. And people are just assuming that this wasn't the plan and Athena's taken advantage. And I just don't think that that's fair.
I think there are two different things in this match. One of which is them working stiff. I think is probably just what they were going to do anyway. But it's more like she slipped up. Jody Threat, that is, slipped up, and then forgot where they were going.
Yeah.
And Athena did not respond to that as well as she should have done if she was supposed to be leading the match into getting them back on track.
Yeah.
But I do think those, from reading that report and watching the match, they feel like two separate things.
Yes.
But again, because it's at the same time as the Hangman thing, because I feel like this didn't actually become a thing when Dark aired. It became a thing after the Hangman injury.
Yeah.
And I think sort of like you get 1-on-1 and you make 3, and I meant it that time. That's when you start putting pieces together. You start getting your little red rope and you're tying things together, and you come up with this idea that AEW is an unsafe working environment.
Don't know what that was.
I made a cable fall by using my mind alone.
The power of your voice.
The power of my voice. The power of my maths made that cable slip. So yeah, I just thought it was an interesting conversation to be had, and I think that I'm looking forward to reading the comments from this, because I think it will evolve into 2 camps. Those that are just like, accidents happen and they've had a bad run of luck with things, and those that are like, no, this is bad and they should be held accountable for this. And I'm just curious as like on that latter half of just like, what are your personal interests and what your personal styles of wrestling that you like? Because if you don't like stiff style of wrestling, then you probably aren't going to be on board with people doing it and therefore getting injured off the back of it, even if it is just an accident.
I don't have anything else to say.
Well, in which case, we'll probably wrap this one up then. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Blackpool Content Club. Please do let us know in the comments down below, because we will be reading all of them, and we do read them. Also, press the thumbs up button, give us a subscribe, and all that good jazz. We'll see you next week for the Blackpool Content Club, where hopefully all 3 of us will be in full condition. Till then, I've been Nico and DAD. That has been Chopper Pete Quinnell. Jam that jam.